Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Serena and I'm a doctor who originally trained in the UK and is now doing locum work around Australia. A lot of people have been asking me a lot of questions about locuming in Australia, and so I've put absolutely everything that I've learned and experienced into this video together with the help of the sponsors of this video, Messly. Messly helps doctors find locum work by making the best locum agencies compete to give you your dream locum job. And most excitingly, for any of you watching this video hoping to do locum work in Australia like me, Messly is launching their locum agency finding services in Australia this year in 2023. But more about that later. As always, there'll be timestamps in the video description below, so you can skip ahead to the part of the video that will be most useful for you. Firstly, what is a locum job? Essentially, they are ad hoc shifts that you pick up depending on which hospitals have gaps in their rota that they might be looking to temporarily fill. With locum shifts, you are essentially self-employed and you manage which shifts you pick up in which hospitals, specialities, what duration of contract length you want to work for, and you can even pick between different levels of pay. So why would you choose to work this way and be a locum doctor? Well, usually it allows for a lot more flexibility, is usually much higher pay, and allows you to try a variety of different locations if that's something you're interested in exploring. While this way of working sounds great for some, it does come with its own disadvantages. For example, you can be moving around a lot geographically. There's no guarantee of steady, regular income. It depends on where the rota gaps are at what time. Because you're not part of a formalized training program as such, there's no formal supervision or career progression either. However, overall, I think locuming offers a lot of flexibility with time and money, and definitely something worthwhile considering at some point in your career in medicine if those are things you are looking for. Number 2, what do you need? Now, if you haven't guessed by the title of this video, I am specifically talking about locuming in Australia, so all the information in this video will be tailored to that. Locum work means working independently, so you cannot be on a registration that requires supervision. Therefore, you need full APRA registration to do locum work. For me, that meant working on a provisional APRA license for 1 year. That was in full-time employment with regular assessments throughout that year. It was only after completing that I could apply for my full registration, and once that came through, I could start applying for locum work. Another way of having full APRA registration, I believe, is by having specialist registration if you're already fully specialized, but more information about that can be found on the APRA website. It's not something that I personally have experience with, as I came over without specialist training. The next thing you need, in my opinion, is a locum agency. I think there are ways to find locum work independently, but through an agency, the process is a lot more streamlined and there's a lot more support with paperwork and having access to a good choice of jobs as well. How do you find a locum agency? To help you with that, I'm so excited to now talk a little bit more about the sponsors of this video, Messly. Choosing which locum agency you go with is one of the most important decisions you make before you start locuming. This decision really determines how smooth your process is of finding jobs and the quality and variety of jobs that are offered to you. However, there is a huge variety, and picking between them can be pretty frustrating and daunting for doctors. This is where Messly come in and make this process so much easier and smoother by bringing together all the best locum agencies in Australia and pitching them to you on one platform. On this platform, you can read reviews by other doctors, choose who you want to work with, and sort out all of the registration and paperwork in one place. In the UK, Messly services are already the way that locum doctors find work, with over 15,000 doctors using the service now. And very excitingly for Australian locums, in 2023, Messly is coming to Australia. Their services are everything and more that I wish I had had when I was setting out looking for locum work, and luckily for you, you can check out all of their new announcements this year on Messly.com.au. My extra personal tip with picking locum agencies would be to pick more than one agency. This is for a few different reasons. Firstly, you'll get a much wider choice of jobs if you've got 2 agencies pitching options to you. Secondly, it also allows for a bit of leeway for perhaps slower communication and delays with finding jobs with one agency if you've got a backup one as well. That's exactly what happened to me. I signed up to 2 agencies. With one agency, I really wasn't hearing much back in time through emails, and the paperwork was also very slow, and I actually didn't end up signing up on any jobs with them in the end. whilst the other agency I'd signed up to were very, very on it and got jobs and things sorted so quickly. So I'm really glad I had the foresight to apply to 2 in the beginning. Quick disclaimer here, I wouldn't advise going to the other extreme and applying for loads of locum agencies. Probably 2 or 3 would be the absolute maximum, because every agency requires its own paperwork and, importantly, its own references. You'll need to ask consultants and registrars to be your referees, and you don't want them filling out too much paperwork from their end for every agency that you apply to, so just bear that in mind. So moving on to then, what is the process and paperwork involved? Like I just mentioned, you need references. I think there was 2 to 3 referees for each agency I applied to. I think I asked 2 consultants that I'd recently worked with and a senior registrar that knew me well as well. Make sure you tell them what jobs you're applying for, what agencies to expect emails from, and of course get their permission. Secondly, I would set up some phone calls with the agencies that you've applied to. Usually they got in touch with us and asked to set up a call. It's just really useful to have that initial chat about what jobs you're looking for over what time frame to make sure that agency can meet your needs. Paperwork wise, you'll need the usual kind of identity documentations, your vaccination records as well, which if you've applied to come to Australia from abroad like me, you will have had all of that filed away somewhere, hopefully. You'll need your APRA full registration number, like I mentioned, so make sure you've waited for that to come in. For example, I tried to apply for some jobs when I knew it was coming, but I hadn't received it, and actually found out I couldn't apply for that job until I had the number in hand, so make sure you have that. You might also need to look at your indemnity, because the type of indemnity you have might change for locum work compared to normal contracted full-time work. The locum agency will be able to guide you on that as well. There was also various locum specific paperwork I had to do, some statutory declarations which needed to be notarized. Again, the agency will guide you through what paperwork that is and make sure you ask what exactly needs to be notarized. In Australia, I found there's a lot of free notary services. There was a service at my hospital and various others around the city, so make sure you get that sorted nice and early as well. Finally, importantly, you also need what is called a Australian business number, an ABN, because now you are basically self-employed and you have to manage your own finances and your own taxes as well. The ABN is a number you need to be registered as a self-employed person or a sole trader, as they call it here, and allow agencies or hospitals to invoice you when you work for them. Alongside this, you may or may not need to apply for a good service tax that you charge on your invoices, which is a 10% tax for providing a service. This is charged if you're earning currently over $75,000 in Australia annually. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this because there's a lot to it, and let's be honest, I barely understand it myself, but I really strongly advise getting all the support you can from the locum agency. Ours helped us a lot with step-by-step guides of what we needed to do, and also an accountant to help you work out what you need to be doing and applying for with regards to taxes and pensions, etc. How to pick locum jobs. Now, this will be quite personal to you. You need to look at a few key things. Firstly is the location, so whether you want to be in a city or more rural. Obviously, your lifestyle and also the type of work, importantly, that you do will vary a lot. If it is a more rural job, then there may be less support, less subspecialty teams, and you might be required to take on a bit more responsibility. So that's something to look into. The speciality will of course depend on your interests and what you have experience in. I would definitely not recommend locuming in a speciality that you've not done before and want to try out, because remember, locum work is independent working, so you should be bringing a certain set of skills and experience to the table rather than expecting supervision for something that's totally brand new. On that note, supervision level is very important to check carefully. Make sure you ask what your senior support will be like, how the department is structured, and do not feel pressurized to work in a situation that you don't feel is safe for you. I have unfortunately heard of some horror stories where people take up jobs expecting to have a senior registrar, but then they find out there is no senior support team and they are the most senior person there, and they don't feel it is in line with their experience or competences, and that's not a very good position to be in. So make sure you check all of this very carefully before. For me, I've asked for emergency medicine jobs because I've done ED jobs before, I've got experience in it, and it's fairly easy to locum in, and there are usually a lot of ED jobs available from what I'm seeing. Secondly, I've also asked for surgical jobs because although I have experience in it, it's also what I want more experience in. Things like admitting surgical patients and going to theatre are opportunities that you can get while locuming in surgery as well. Next, you need to look at duration of the job. So clarify how long this job is for, because some hospitals are looking for only long-term locums. So if you've only got a couple of weeks here and there and the hospital's looking for someone for several months, that might not be the best fit. And finally, very importantly, the pay. The pay I found varies quite a lot between different locum jobs because of how in demand they are, how desperate the hospital is basically, and of course what kind of responsibility will be expected from you. If there is a pay that looks too good to be true, it's a lot higher than what you've seen before, then do take the time to question it a bit further. There might be a reason it is too good to be true. Another important point about the pay is do not be afraid to negotiate. Like I said, locum work exists because hospitals are trying to fill gaps, and if it is very short notice or a particularly demanding job or in a location that people might not want to work, then there is a bit more leverage there to ask for higher pay. And don't be afraid of negotiating that. The worst that can happen is they'll say no, so you might as well ask. Along with pay, it's not just the money that the job will be offering. There is often other perks such as accommodation, transport, flights, things like hire cars that can potentially be included as well. So make sure you're asking all these questions and really trying to make the most of your locum experience. Next, I just thought I'd briefly talk a bit about my experiences. There are already a couple of locum related videos on my channel, so be sure to check them out for a bit more information. So probably around 1 to 2 months before I was due to get my full APRA registration, I started laying down some groundwork for looking into locum work. So doing research of locum agencies and started talking to referees about references I might need in the near future. With the locum agencies, it was an initial slow process of coordinating when we could have our initial phone conversation, being told about all the initial paperwork we had to send. So I would advise, if you're keen to get started with locum work soon after you're fully registered, to start getting these things sorted fairly early, because it does take a while to collect it all in the first instance. It probably took me over a month to 6 weeks to actually start getting the first job offers coming through, and then I realized I couldn't actually accept any until I was fully registered, so that added a bit more of a delay. But I'm still really glad I had all the paperwork sorted by the time the registration came through, because when it did, it was pretty seamless to then just start applying for jobs. When it comes to securing jobs, you pretty much just let your agency know which ones of the options work for you. It's not competitive as such, it's more just due to how soon you get back to your agency and how many doctors the hospitals are looking for. Then there's a lot of back and forth between you and the agency and the hospital, working out dates, finalizing transport, accommodation, pay. So it does take a little bit of time. I have found that for all the flexibility and freedom that locum work gives you, it is a lot of admin, not just the initial paperwork, but actually sorting out the jobs. There is so much back and forth, and then you're trying to fit in the terms of the job to what your plans are, especially if, like a lot of people, you're trying to travel at the same time. So you're trying to work out where you'll be, where you can be for jobs, and yeah, that gets a little bit tedious at times. One thing I've also not realized until quite recently is that it is actually quite exhausting to not have a base, and I didn't quite appreciate that for what it was when I had it. It's quite hard work moving around all the time, living out of a suitcase and kind of moving from hotel room to hotel room. It's by no means a problem or anything like that, but it is a very different kind of lifestyle, one that requires a lot of movement, a lot of refamiliarizing yourself with different places, working out how new cities work, new places work, new commutes. Very exciting, great way to earn money and travel at the same time, but just something to consider. I have talked more about my experiences in my other videos, so I'll just link them somewhere on the screen now if you want to go and check those out. Finally, to finish, I'm going to answer some of my most common locum FAQs. Firstly, people have asked, can you locum whilst working? So while you have your full-time normal contracted job, can you also pick up some ad hoc locum shifts in your days off, for example? Now, I couldn't find any definitive rules about this, beyond that it is at the discretion of your full-time employer. However, I had a friend who I worked with in ED who was working full-time in Queensland, but would drive to the New South Wales border on his days off and pick up some locum shifts there. So I think there was a little bit of flexibility there, but obviously that's not easy and that will be pretty exhausting. So something to consider. Best thing would be to discuss with your full-time employer what is okay to do. Secondly, I have touched on this before, but I always get asked how much I get paid. This varies hugely. There doesn't seem to be any real regulation on this. So do your due diligence when you're looking at pay rates of jobs you're being offered. The rates I have seen for a resident medical officer, so a post-graduation year 3/4-ish doctor, has ranged between 120 and 180 Australian dollars an hour. There have been outliers on either end. I've seen jobs for about 100 at its lowest, $100 an hour, and also some outrageous jobs at $400 an hour. These are super rare, and I've no idea what's making those prices so high. So yeah, do your research. I also get a lot of visa questions about whether my visa is valid for locum work. Now, I am on the same visa that I got when I got my initial contracted full-time job in Australia, and I can't advise on your specific situation, but you can turn to your locum agency for support. They often have immigration lawyers, visa people to discuss your specific situation. So make sure you utilize that and discuss whether your visa allows you to do locum work. If not, I know agencies can also sponsor you for a visa that is valid for locum work if your current existing one isn't. How do I manage my taxes as a self-employed worker? For this, I would very strongly advise you get an accountant. That is what I am planning to do, to retrospectively look at my earnings and work out what I need to be doing from a taxes and pensions point of view. So I would very much advise you do the same. Alright, that is everything from me today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video useful, and I'll see you in a video soon. Bye!